The more I research tactical RPGs to make this game, the more I realize how complex these games are and how important it is to mask all this complexity so that the player doesn't have to think about it while playing. Like, for example, the fact that your character is or is not compatible with the enemy when attacking them, or whether the type of weapon you are using is compatible or not with the armor the enemy is wearing. And even the compatibility between classes, all of this changes the gameplay in a way that the player doesn't necessarily need to know is being changed. They simply play and enjoy all of these things without even knowing. However, a keen player who wants to make the most of everything can indeed research and benefit from it. All of this is present in these games in an extremely succinct way, where it is not exactly necessary for the player to know this to enjoy the game. It is also something that he can indeed take advantage of. Something that is increasingly present in tactical RPGs is the way to speed up the game as much as possible. Turn-based RPGs in general have suffered a bit with the time, where before they were the kings of the genre, ended up losing ground to action RPGs, where the gameplay is always much more dynamic and better for the player. The best, I would say that the action RPG itself gives up the strategic part to enhance the action part, the more dynamic part. Considering today's games meeting, the presence of the general public is indeed to have more dynamic games, faster games, and not to wait longer and longer for your turn to come to take an action and to perform a simple action. Navigate through several menus until it happens. A turn-based RPG, for example, is Pokemon. Pokemon, for you to perform a simple action, you receive a message saying what you are going to do. Perform the action, an animation happens, a text of what happened occurs, a text if any extra effect is applied, and only then you have the reduction of the enemy's HP. All of this takes time to happen and occurs sequentially, while it could all happen simultaneously, greatly speeding up the game. Many games suffer from this problem, not just Pokemon. And tactical RPGs are indeed turn-based RPGs, which also suffer from this kind of thing. Slow animations and many steps for performing simple actions are things that slow down the game and make matches that could last a few minutes take hours. And something I am doing in this game is making all of this much simpler and faster without losing the strategic tone of the game. I created a new skill system. Each character will have access to 4 actions, that is, 4 action buttons during their turn. One of them is the main button, which will be used for the character to move, attack normally, and pass time. All of this varies depending on where the character applies this action. If applied to an enemy, he will attack him. If applied in an empty space, it will move, and if you click on yourself, it will pass the turn. The other 3 actions are abilities selected by the player, one of them being necessarily a class ability the character is in, and the other 2 can be edited by the player. Unlike Final Fantasy Tactics, which is the game I am taking inspiration from, and in it you can not exactly add skills to the character, but rather you add a group of skills related to a class. For example, you can have a character who uses skills from a knight and a mage, and depending on how many abilities you have already unlocked, you will be able to use all abilities related to that class. In my system, you will only have that, you will have 3 abilities. However, to compensate for all this, I created a more customizable skill system. Each skill will be tied to an action button. You will no longer need to navigate menus to activate your skill. You simply need to be in a cell where you'll be able to use it and click the corresponding button, and then the character will use it automatically. It can be considered a shortcut where instead of navigating menus, you simply click a button and the skill happens. And to test everything, I created the first 2 classes of the game, which are the Apprentice and the Disciple. Just like the Squad or Squire, and the Chemist or Chemistry from Final Fantasy Tactics. They represent the initial classes, both in the physical and magical realms. However, my idea is to take the classes even further to be this idea of an initial class for each one, where among their skills, you acquire basic skills to be used, which can be used throughout the entire game. And also skills that will help you evolve, like skills that increase the amount of experience points, and the amount of class experience, which are experiences used to purchase skills, as well as some basic techniques. As I mentioned before, the skills are much more customizable, and what does that mean? The skills this time, It comes with a kind of slot where you can equip other techniques. For example, if you have an ability where you throw a magic sphere, you can add a technique to it that will also cause the enemy to be poisoned. Maybe another technique that will make it push your enemy. In this way, the same skill can, in addition to causing the damage it normally would, push the enemy and cause poison. This can also be customized in various ways. That was just an example. It could, for instance, from poisoning, paralyzing the enemy, instead of pushing, increasing the damage. This is a way I found to also balance the abilities. In games of this type, it is very common to have skills that are weaker than others, and this is not always balanced. It means that by having stronger abilities, you will generally abandon the weaker ones as they no longer make sense to use. This way, you can customize a weaker skill, which will have a greater number of slots, so that it can be comparable to a stronger skill, which in contrast will not have as many slots. A form of balancing I created was to make a small table where I analyze the pros and cons of each skill to get an idea of how balanced they are. For example, something positive, an offensive skill causing a negative effect, increasing its damage, increasing its accuracy, and so on. It can be counterbalanced with a higher cost of MP and even a cost in its functionalities, such as cast time required for the skill to be used, even the cost to purchase this skill and have fewer slots. I added all this to a table so that I can have a better sense of game balance. Currently, the two classes I created, being the apprentice and the disciple, are almost fully working. Some abilities have not been added yet, simply because they require other systems that I have not made yet. But by adding these classes, other systems have already been added, such as the casting of abilities. Casting an ability might seem a little easier than it really is, because actually your character is always being considered in the turn of other characters, so that at the moment when the ability be cast, it will be used even if it is not his turn. And for that, it was necessary to completely revamp the way turns are considered. Another issue was also the use of attributes, as some of these initial class abilities increase the character's physical and magical power. Besides obviously being inspired by Final Fantasy tactics, I couldn't resist giving the main character of the apprentice an ability to throw a stone, which once again may be a skill that doesn't have much utility in the game. But here, with the use of slots and some equipment, you can indeed make it a very useful ability. The appearance of the two classes was designed in such a way that it reflects what they truly are, where the apprentice would be a combat apprentice who indeed uses armor, a light armor and some simpler equipment, and the disciple would be like a magic student, having in their appearance a backpack and clothing that resembles something of that sort. Inside the game, just like in many role-playing games in general, there will indeed be a form of energy, which is usually considered as human in RPGs. Here is the same idea, but this will be changed to ether. Ether is nothing more than a human concept, but it can be seen and manipulated physically in liquid form. This small change allowed me to create various animations and images for the abilities, such as the simple ability of the DC. Disciple, which is the apprentice of mages, is to shoot an ether missile or an ether sphere, as you prefer, just like the simple abilities of apprentice is to enhance his attack with ether before attacking, and all of this is shown in his animations. It's also worth mentioning that my idea for the appearances of the classes is to only change their clothing, inspired by RPG games like Ragnarok Online, where each class has a different outfit, but you could customize your character's appearance through the hairstyle of your hair and hats. Here it won't be much different, even though I have created a different hairstyle for each class. You can indeed change your hair color and hairstyle as you see fit. This also helps to differentiate the characters during the game. Where you will find several mages who won't look exactly the same, since they are different characters. The same applies to other classes, and even so, you will still have that class identity where you will see an apprentice and know that it is an apprentice, even if they look different from each other. Starting with the classes with the apprentice and the disciple, I also made a diagram where you get an idea of how acquiring new classes will be and what each class does. All this was divided into class functions. Not necessarily will it be all these classes that will exist, and not necessarily will it be only these classes, but it's really to get an idea of how the game will be within the classes, since the class system in this type of game is something extremely important, and it is something that often makes the player want to try the game, since it is often how you change your gameplay and make each player have a different way of playing. I created a little system here where I have some functions like magic damage, physical damage, distance, support and utility, and assign these functions to classes, allowing the same class to have up to 2 functions, which will be divided into the class's skills and its attributes. For example, a class that will have 2 functions focused on magical damage will be, for example, a mage. Common, unlike other classes that also have the magic damage function, it will have higher damage since it will only have this function, and that another class, for example, will have damage physical and giving the distance, which will make it not as efficient in each one. However, it will have the versatility to use both. All this can be altered by the player with the system. The skill customization system is where you will be able to assign skills from one class to another. This way, each character becomes increasingly unique. Additionally, you can indeed change the character's equipment and weapons, which also alters their gameplay. Each class will also have an arsenal of passive skills that can be assigned in the game. This way, you can have movement skills, reaction skills, and passive skills, that general alteration of the player. All of this is present in Final Fantasy Tactics, but with this little system of skill customization, it can be much better utilized. In the end, a simple idea that was made to improve the player's quality of life by speeding up the game with a little system of shortcuts to use skills was the starting point for this whole system. In this way, I also made all the animations somewhat fast, where everything happens much more dynamically. You still have an understanding of what is happening. In the game, you definitely have a point of strategy, because during your turn, you will have all the time you need. But this way, allocating most of the battle time to the player's decisions, which cuts out all the time needed for the player to wait for the story to unfold. I would also like to thank everyone who sent comments on the last video and also recommended games for me to see and analyze. These games help a lot. I've already analyzed some and I appreciate it. This also made me realize the number of people who like this type of genre. And it makes me very happy to know that it's a type of genre that people embrace and enjoy. As I said before, it's my favorite game genre, where my favorite game is, which is Final Fantasy Tactics. So I'm very happy to know that this game, which is a game made from the heart, is being appreciated by other people. Even though it's still in development, as I said before, I will try to maintain a frequency of updates here, because it also helps me have more motivation to continue with this game. I hope those who enjoy this type of game are liking it. Comment there, like this video, and I look forward to seeing you next week for more updates. So that's it, and bye.